Hello everyone and welcome. This is a tutorial for the game Crusader Kings II by Paradox Interactive. Crusader Kings II is quite a complex and in-depth game. There's a lot of systems within systems that affect other systems. There's a lot of very interesting concepts which don't exist in too many games, and it runs on the Clausewitz engine, which isn't exactly a common design unless you're a fan of Paradox games. The purpose of this tutorial isn't really for advanced play, it's to help orientate people who are new to the game, or new to this sort of thing in general. So, without further ado, let's get started. So, single player game will start in 1066. You can choose a variety of start dates, all of which are various interesting points in European history, but we're going to go with 1066 for no other reason than, well, it gives us a nice start up, as you will see in a moment. You then choose who it is that you want to play as, and in this case we're going to play as the Duke Murchad I of Munster. I probably completely mispronounced that, I do apologise. Okay, so all you need to do is click on the realm. You can also set different views here, so independent realms, you can see that this is all that belongs to our friend Murchad here, who we shall start calling you, or me, from now on to save my horrific pronunciation. If you want to play at a specific level, you could also choose to see counts, dukes and kings. So that will show you the various kingdoms and so forth. If you click into one of these, you can see the vassals there, and from there you can navigate and find your own, yes, see it, king. But for now, we just want counts, we want dukes, and Thormond, and this fella. Now you can, if you want, of course, use the ruler designer. If you have that DLC, you can design your own coat of arms, you can change your attributes, but for the purposes of this tutorial, we're not going to bother. We're just going to leave it as standard, and that makes it nice and straightforward. So we've selected our character, we've selected our start date, hit play. Alright, while the game's initializing, let's talk about some of the core concepts of this title. The first is that you are not really ruling a country or territories as such. This game is more concerned with the idea of your dynasty or dynasty, depending on how you want to pronounce it. It's your bloodline. To that end, these territories are simply tools. They're a way of keeping score, if you will. They're resources to be used. You can, for example, start out with Ireland, completely lose it, but still have other territories and still come out with a really good score if your dynasty's got holdings elsewhere. So what I'm trying to say here is that there's not a real need to save scum in this game. You know, a bad decision will not destroy your game. It doesn't punish bad single decisions most of the time. It will, however, punish consistently bad decisions. What I would say is, if you're learning, then save scumming is probably permissible because you don't yet quite understand the decisions you're being given and the consequences of those decisions. So feel free to save and reload if you picked something that you didn't want to. But when you actually want to start playing the game, when you think that you've got a good enough handle on it, you can do a good playthrough, don't save scum. Just save and reload when you leave the game, and just let your bad decisions play out, because sometimes they go to places you wouldn't expect. So that's the idea of the dynasty. So in this first video, we're going to get acquainted with the interface. I'm not going to go into too much detail about what each part of the interface actually does in terms of the gameplay. I'm just trying to give you a high-level, high-concept idea as to what each one is used for. That way, when I start using certain words like politics or military, you'll have the associations with certain screens, and you'll know which screens relate to which sort of aspects of the game. So first of all, let's make sure we've got a useful view. To do that, we go down to the map here in the bottom right corner and toggle the map modes interface. First one is terrain. This is actually pretty useless, to be honest. It looks pretty, but that's about it. Independent realms is the most useful. This shows you all of the current areas which fall under the rule of a lord. So for example, you see here that Thomond and Ormond are both part of the same realm, as it were, because they are both the same colour. In this case, it belongs to us. If you click on your character portrait here and look at the titles, you will see that I am the Duke of Munster, and I also own the county of Thomond. But wait a minute, I own Ormond as well, don't I? Well, yes and no. This game is based on the feudal system, which means that the realms that you control are different from the realms which are considered, well, are different from the territories which are considered a part of your overall realm. So if we look at Ormond, you can see it is actually controlled by this guy, Earl Ragvold of Ormond. However, if you go again to the character sheet and look at vassals, you will see that Ragvold is in fact one of my vassals. So while I don't control this territory, I do control the person who owns this territory. And this is the difference between domain and realm, which we will get into at the moment. For now, all you need to be aware of is the fact that there is a big difference between the territories which you personally command and the territories where you simply command the person who controls that territory. If you're familiar with the old Space Empires game, think of them like the old Minister AIs. That should help form a comparison. Okay, we can also set diplomatic relations, so you can see your relations with the rest of the world. As you can see here, we've not got particularly good diplomatic ties, but it could be a lot worse. Religions allows you to see the various religions and the sway they hold. You see we have Sunni and Shia here, big patches of Sunni, Zoroastrian over here, Tengri. I have no idea what that means. To be completely honest with you, I'm not a history buff. I have absolutely no idea what a lot of this actually means in terms of historical context. I just know what it means from a gameplay perspective. And generally what it means from a gameplay perspective is try not to piss off the other religions, because they're already pissed with you. Cultures, you can see here we've got Irish, Welsh and Scottish, all the same for Celtic cultures, Saxon here as well, and so on. You tend to get better relations with people who are the same culture as you for obvious reasons. Economy, yeah, that looks about right for the UK economy. De jure, yes, de jure duchies, de jure kingdoms and de jure empires. This is another very important concept of the game, so sit up and pay attention. De jure is basically not necessarily real, but what is considered to be a part of something. De jure literally just means of the day, but in terms of gameplay mechanics, de jure is what essentially is a part of something, but is not necessarily a part of it right now. Let me explain through example. You see here we have de jure duchies. My character here is the Duke of Munster. He holds that title. However, the Duchy of Munster also contains Desmond here. However, at the moment, if we go back to Independent Realms, you will see it is not a part of that. So what does that mean for me? Well, it does mean that I can press a claim on Desmond. Now, if you want to see which parts of a duchy are, well, which parts of any title are de jure and which you actually control, again, you can simply click the title, check the de jure box, and lo and behold, Desmond is in there. So if I control all three of these territories, I control all of that duchy. That's the de jure duchy. From that point, though, it means that I have a de jure claim. Desmond isn't mine, but really it should be, because it's part of the de jure duchy. So it means I have cause to attack Desmond and try and take it over. This is another important concept of the game, in which it differs from games like Civilization, the casus belli, the reason for war. You cannot just attack whoever you want, whenever you want. Not allowed. You need to have a reason to go to war, and a de jure claim is one such reason. In fact, if you look here in my notifications, you will see I can press a de jure ducal claim for Desmond. But we'll get deeper into that in a moment. For now, all you need to understand is that de jure means that if you hold the de jure title, but you don't hold all the territories that go with that de jure title, you have cause to attack the territories you don't own and annex them. That's the basic concept. It's difficult to explain, but if you puzzle over it for a while and try and play, it'll get into your head. So let's keep this on independent realms for now. De jure duchies, de jure kingdoms, and de jure empires. These are also important if you're planning on becoming a king or an emperor. So if we set this to say de jure kingdoms, you can see that there is a kingdom of England, a kingdom of Wales, a kingdom of Scotland, and a kingdom of Ireland. So if I wanted to, I could try and create the title King of Ireland. And if I create that title and give it to myself, that gives me cause to attack any territory in Ireland that I do not currently own. And that, of course, is a very useful political tool. However, creating titles is a long, difficult, and time-consuming process. It is, however, one of the most rewarding parts of the game. So we'll go into that further down the line. Now, same with empires. As you can see, empires go one step higher. Britannia, here, Francia, Hispania, the Roman Empire, the Byzantines, the Russians. Byzantine or Byzantine? Either way, you know what I mean. But you can also become an emperor, which is extremely useful. Because, again, it means that, say I hold Scotland and Ireland and parts of Wales, it means that I have cause to attack England, even if I don't already own it. Revolt risk, again, this is useful for checking the revolt risk in a local area. So as you can see, Europe is pretty stable at the moment. The peasants are not in fact revolting. Some possible dangers there, but nothing huge, and certainly nothing to worry about in my territory. Dynasties. These are the territories controlled by distant dynasties. So Dunkeld, Uabrian. Uabrian is, of course, my dynasty. House Uabrian, there, you can see it on the character sheet. Opinions. These are people's opinions of me. As you can see, my opinion of myself is quite high, as always. My opinions with others, however, not so good. In fact, downright hostile with some people, but they're really far away. And this is why Ireland makes for a good first game. The Scottish are too worried about the English are too worried about the French, the Welsh are, well, just sitting there. So for a good few years, you've basically got no one to worry about. You can concentrate on learning the ropes of the game without having to worry about all of your neighbours and what they're doing. And that's very, very useful when you're looking to learn. Direct vassals. Again, I can see my own vassals here. Republic trade zones. These are for a different expansion pack called the Republic, which focuses a lot more on the whole Venetian and Italian guilds and trading families and so forth. So that's not really relevant to us at the moment. So we'll set this back to independent realms. So that's the map interface. Each of these has its uses, but the most important ones are independent realms, diplomatic relations, opinions, and de jures. If you can remember those, then you've got 90% of what you need to know about the map sorted already. So we'll collapse that for now to give us a better view of everything else. And we'll next move up to the top right hand corner here. Wealth. Pretty much self-explanatory. It's the amount of money that you've got. Hover over it and it'll also tell you your monthly balance. Obviously, if the money's dropping, you might want to do something about that. If the money's going up, then, well, hey, you're in the money. Money is, of course, used to pay for mercenaries. It is used to buy new buildings. It's used for a lot of things, so you want to make sure that you've got plenty of it. Prestige. Prestige is a measure of your of how respected your character is. A high prestige makes diplomatic relations much easier. If you divide prestige by, I believe it's 10, that figure is then added to all of your diplomatic relations. So in this case, I believe I get 3 on top of everyone. It might be 10 or it might be 100. An important difference, but it's been a while since it was relevant to me, so we can check it further down the line when we learn how to look at our relations with other rulers and how to improve them. Prestige is also a useful currency. You remember earlier on I mentioned about creating titles. Creating titles requires that you sacrifice some of your prestige. Now, why is that a part of the game? Well, prestige also influences your final score. When a character dies, their prestige influences their addition to your dynasty's running total. So, if a character dies with a high prestige, they will improve your score a lot more than they will if they die with a low prestige. Pretty straightforward. Piety. Piety is a measure of your character's religious zeal and conviction. It can also be used as a currency to petition the Pope to do things, such as excommunicating your enemies. Piety is also useful with diplomatic relations with religious entities, such as churches and, of course, the papacy. And like prestige, it also influences your final score. Demesne, or domain, as I believe it's supposed to be pronounced, but feel free to correct me on that. Demesne is essentially your personal holdings as a character. It is the territory that you have direct control over. So in this case, my demesne is Thormond. You can see the bishopric here of Kildare is going to be handled by someone else, as is the city of Limerick. If we look at my vassals, you can see that there's a mayor of Limerick, there's a bishop of Killaloe. Killaloe? You know, if I've got Irish people watching, I'm just going to apologise because my pronunciation is terrible. Either way, though, as you can see, the only thing I actually have direct control over is this county and this castle, which is why I've got 1 out of 3 for the county. However, my realm size is 6. This is all of the holdings which constitute both your domain and also the domains of your vassals. So for example, 1, 2 there, so I've got 2 there, 3, 4 and 5 there. So you know, this, and this, I don't actually control myself, but I do control the people who control them. It's the feudal system. It was essentially one giant pyramid scheme. So that's an explanation of those, the difference between your domain and the difference between your realm size. And a larger domain size for yourself is quite useful because that gives you a lot more control over your empire and how it's grown and how much and how it controls. For example, in Ormond, this guy will build various improvements, but I don't have any say in what does get built. He's in control of all that. I can't tell him what to do inside his own territory. I can only do that inside my own territory. So try and expand your domain where you can. Finally is your score. This, I've mentioned before, is basically a running total. Each time a character dies, their prestige, their piety, and several other items are added to determine your final score when the game ends. When does the game end? Well, it ends when the timer runs out. I can't remember which year it's in, but there is a set year where the game ends. Or it ends if your character dies without any heirs, which we'll get to very quickly in a moment because I'm in a perilous situation in that regard. This is the game clock. Click it to pause or unpause the game. You can also set the speed here as well. You can also use the space button to pause and unpause the game. Anyone who's played any of the classic CRPGs should be able to appreciate that mechanic. Urgent messages appear here, low priority messages appear here. Most of the time these aren't actually all that important, but it is worth keeping an eye on the high priority messages as if there's rebellions or so forth, you should be aware of it. Unfortunately, even in the high priority messages, a lot of it is essentially spam. This here is inserts from your domain here, so that's more or less covered there, but this is quite useful if you're looking at rebellions from your vassals, if you want to get an immediate look as to the relative strengths of the domains that you control. In other words, the domains you know are not going to rebel, unless the peasants revolt, of course. That gives you an indication there. Over here is your generic stuff. Ledger, this is a more detailed breakdown of your domains. Main menu, save and so forth. Go back to your home province, always useful. Find title, so for example, if you want to know who the current Earl of wherever is, you can go with that there. Find characters, this is useful if you're looking for characters who meet certain criteria, for example if you want your character to get married. Zoom in and zoom out, why you do this when you have a mouse wheel is beyond me. And that's the basic controls there. So we've covered these important resources / scores, messages, domain quick view, minimap, and map modes. So make sure you're comfortable with the concepts that each of these represent. And once you're comfortable with those concepts, we will move on to the top left-hand corner here. Okay, urgent notifications appear up here. In this case, unmarried heir, pick an ambition, and I can press a de jure ducal claim. So let's have a look at what each of these means. Unmarried heir. Click on it and it brings up the character sheet, and this character sheet is in fact for my heir, as signified by this little crown. Star signifies the person you're currently playing as. So if we click back here, you can see he's the heir, and he's unmarried. Now this is quite a perilous situation. A character who is unmarried cannot have legitimate children. If they do not have any legitimate children, they do not have any heirs. If the current head of the dynasty dies without any heirs, it's game over. So you want to make sure that your heirs are married and are having children as soon as possible, so that if they die suddenly, there's at least someone there to take up the council. But we'll get him married in a moment. We'll worry about that in a minute. For now, all you need to know is that you need to make sure you have a line of succession set up. Okay, so if we close that for now. Next, ambition. Ambitions are basically your announcement as to your plans. Why would you want to announce your plans when people knowing your plans gives them power? Well, there are rewards if you achieve them. You can set an ambition here. So you can see there's a variety of options available. Some of them are to raise your stats, so for example improve learning, improve intrigue, and so forth. However, right now I think the best one is to get married. And why is that? Well, I only have one heir. That means if he dies in battle or gets assassinated, and if I were to follow him, then, well, the game ends. And it will be pretty embarrassing to end the game after having only played one character. It's also worth noting that you can randomly die of disease in this game. It's like Oregon Trail, only much more heart-wrenching. So let's set my ambition as get married. If you hover over them, you can also see the effects. So for example, if I succeed in marrying, I gain 10 piety. Now, I could simply marry anyway. I don't need to set the ambition in order to do it, but if I get married without setting that ambition, I don't get that bonus. So I might as well set the ambition, do what I'm going to do anyway, and get the extra bonus for it. Hover over each of these to see what they do and what effect they have. You can see the success conditions and the success effects. So I have now announced that. This will also show up in other elements as well. For example, if you're searching through the character lists, you can see any ambitions that they have as well. As the game has only just started, there aren't that many. There's mine. There's me there. But helping people to fulfill ambitions is a good idea. Also, other people who are looking to get married will be more likely to accept your marriage proposals as well. However, effective marriages is another matter entirely, but we will discuss that soon. For now, as I say, I just want to get you comfortable with the different screens of the game, what they're used for, and what the different elements mean, so that when we actually start playing the game, you'll know which screens you want to go to, roughly, in order to achieve your various effects. So let's have a quick look at the stats here. You've got diplomacy. Diplomacy affects other people's opinions of you. Martial ability, it's important for generals, so if you're leading an army and you have a high martial score, the army will perform better. Stewardship is essentially your economy. Tax income is increased if you have a much better stewardship score. Intrigue, that determines the effectiveness of your plots. So the intrigue skill is the primary attribute of the spy master. We'll get onto the court position. Well, we'll get onto the council positions in a moment, but essentially intrigue, very useful for assassinations, spying, and so forth. State learning. The learning ability is essentially your speed of your research. This is the state score. So the state score is a culmination of your score and the scores of your councillors. These are your personal scores in each field. Below that, next to them, we have, again, these are just repeats of stats up here in the top right hand corner. And then we have attributes. Now, attributes are an interesting one. Your character can be created with them or generated with them if you so desire with the character creation editor at the start of the game. They also accumulate them as they progress through life, and their childhood also dictates a lot of them as well, which is why it is important to send your children off to become wards. But again, we'll cover that further down the line when we look at diplomacy. So for example, this one, tough soldier. It's adding 3 to my martial score, -1 to my learning score, and plus 1/2 to my health. So that basically means that it makes me a much better killing machine, but it reduces the research. And it also means that I'm slightly less likely to outright die of something. Brave. No negatives here. Plus 10% to morale defense. We'll again cover morale further down the line. Then plus 2 to my martial score. Gregarious, plus 2 to diplomacy. Cruel. Again, that increases morale damage in sieges and battle, but it also increases my intrigue, reduces my diplomacy. So you get the idea. There's a lot of interplay here with these. So it's important to pay attention when situations arise which could change or add an attribute. That's the basic gist of the character sheet. You can arrange marriages here, which we'll cover in a minute. This lets you look at your realms, your family tree and so forth. Have a look at these in your own time. They're not hugely vital to the gameplay, at least not at a basic level. When you're looking at engineering bloodlines and so forth in order to try and get people's titles to pass into your family after their deaths and succession, that's when you want to start looking at these. But for now, don't worry too much about it. But do have a look at them, because if you can make sense of them, well, you can make sense of the game and play better. But if not, don't worry, we'll cover them more later. Finally, on the character sheet is this lot, which is not really part of your character sheet, but more useful information. Family shows children, siblings, parents, grandparents. Wards, this is anyone who you're supposed to be educating. Vassals are the people who are directly, people who answer directly to you. Courts is basically these are your hangers-on. These are people who aren't really your vassals or your family members, but are advisors and basically a part of the group of satellites that follows you around. They're sort of like paparazzi crossed with clerks. So these guys are useful for marrying off and creating allegiances with other people, but for the most part you just want to make sure you've got a good relationship with them, because they're also close to you. So if they don't like you and someone's plotting to assassinate you, they may approach one of your court, and if the courtier doesn't like you, they may agree to become part of the plot, and that's dangerous. Allies. These are people who can be called into war with you. Allies are cemented through marriage. So for example, if your house and someone else's house are joined by marriage, you can call on that house during war to assist. Abroad, courtiers who are currently in foreign powers. So, for example, they are imprisoned or being educated there. Furthermore, councillors, even if rulers themselves, will reside at the court of their liege. So this basically tells you who's not members of your court who aren't with you for some reason. Okay, so that's the basic gist of these tabs here. Next up, we're going to look at these screens, and then we're probably going to draw this tutorial to a close, as it's running on quite long and I'm giving you a lot of information here. And it takes time to digest this information, so we'll draw the tutorial to a close there, and then we'll look at actually playing the game once we've had a chance to absorb what we've learned so far. Council. You can appoint your councillors with these buttons here. Councillors can perform special actions as determined by these buttons here. The effectiveness of those actions is determined by their stats, which you can check here. You can hover over them if you like to give a better indication of how good they actually are. 13 is masterful, 19 masterful. I've got a pretty good court here. I think these figures are a bit inflated, to be honest, because I can quite often get councillors who have their stats well into the 20s, but it's what the game considers useful. Ideally, you want to make sure that your councillors are people who you trust. You want them to have a good relationship with them, but at the same time, giving someone a position in the council can improve your relationship with them, so sometimes you want to play it the other way. You don't really trust someone, but by giving them a seat on the council, their opinion of you improves, and that means you can start to trust them. Then that's one of the parts of Crusader Kings II. You've got to consider these sorts of things and weigh the options. So what do each of these people do? Your Chancellor is essentially your diplomat. He's your ambassador. He can improve diplomatic relations. Again, you can hover over it to see the chances here. So for example, There's a 32% chance yearly that I will improve the relations with the Lord, and there's a 4% chance that I will damage my relations each year. So again, sending them on missions, there's a good chance that they'll do something good, but there's also a small chance they'll do something bad. That's true for most of these actions. Fabricate claims. You recall the idea of the casus belli, the fact that you need a reason to go to war and conquer. You can fabricate a claim on a territory in order to do that. So let's say, for example, I wanted to take over Ossory here. I've got no claim on Ossory. It's not a part of the de jure dukedom that I'm in. It's not ever been a part of my family's bloodline. There's never been any idea of it being inherited by my dynasty. There is no claim. However, I can send my chancellor to fabricate a claim. He has an 18% chance of doing so, and if he succeeds, well, that means that I can then declare war and conquer Ossory. So fabricating claims is a very useful way to expand your borders, but beware, it will piss people off when you do it. So try using other means if you can first. Finally, sow dissent. Sow dissent basically pisses off the relationship between vassals and their liege. So it's very useful, say, if you've got quite a powerful enemy on your borders, you can sow dissent, and that will basically increase internal tensions within that ruler's realm and force them to direct resources at resolving that. So for now, I've got a fairly good relationship with this character here. His opinion of me is 31. Opinions are fairly cordial all around. So what do I want to do with this guy? Well, I'm going to improve diplomatic relations in Ormond anyway. You'll see why in a bit. When you set one of these tasks, you cannot assign a new one until further down the line. So just remember that. You can switch them. It takes less than a year for this to run out, but it does mean that once you've made that decision, you're committed to it for a period of time. Okay, the Marshal. Marshal is essentially your war leader. He's your general. So his options are to suppress revolts, but again, if we look at revolt risk, no such problems at the moment. Train troops. This increases the size of the levy from the territory in which the person is training the troops, as well as the reinforcement rate. So that is very useful if you're at war to increase the size of your armies. And he's got research and military tech. We'll go with research and military tech for now. Tech research is something that can only be done inside your domain. It can't be done anywhere in your realm, only inside your domain. So remember that one. Your steward. Your steward holds the purse strings. He can collect taxes, so it improves tax income from an area. He can oversee construction to increase the speed of buildings being constructed, and he can research economy tech. We're pretty low on cash, plus 0.72 a month, so let's have him collect taxes in Thormond. And you can see after a while that should improve, because what will happen is one of two things. This doesn't actually improve your rate of collection. What it does do is give you a 10% chance of getting an extra on top of that each year. There's also a 2% chance of peasants attacking the steward, because, well, he's trying to extort more money out of them than they need to actually pay. Spy Master, the cloak and dagger. You can scheme. Scheming is defensive spying. If there are plots against you, this has a good chance of uncovering them. It also discourages your vassals from joining other political factions. We'll cover political factions in a moment. It also encourages them to join your faction if you are creating such a faction. Now, just remember, scheme, defensive spying. Build spy network, offensive spying. This improves your chances of assassination. It can uncover corruption and also spread vicious rumours, so you send your spy master to other territories in order to achieve those effects, which are damaging. So don't do that inside your own territory, it's not worth it. And finally, there's study technology, which enables your spy master to try and discover technology from more advanced cultures than yours. For now, let's go with study technology, and for no real reason at all, let's dump him in. Borges here. You see, this is one way you can put him anywhere. Others you have limitations, such as your domain, your realm, and so forth. Finally, your court chaplain. They have 3 different possibilities with this. The court chaplain can convert the populace, which is not much use here, seeing as everyone's already Catholic, but in areas like Norway and Sweden, where there is the alternative religions, or here in the Iberian Peninsula especially, where you have Catholicism Catholicism clashing with the Muslim cultures, that's where you tend to find that useful. If you've taken over a territory which is predominantly a different religion, bringing them into your religion is a good way of improving relations and reducing the risk of rebellion. Research cultural tech, again like the others, it can only be done in your domain, but enables you to research cultural tech, which we'll get on with later. Improving religious relations. This allows you to improve your relations with a religious-based leader. So, for example, in Thormond, we have the bishopric of Killaloe. We see who owns it. It's this fellow. If we were to send the court chaplain to Thormond with that mission, improve religious relations, it would improve our relations with this character and improve his opinion of us. You can also send him to the papacy, and there he can attempt to improve relations with Das Pope, which is useful. Having a pope on your side is always useful if you're playing as a Catholic dynasty. So those are your councillors. They are special characters. You can appoint them, you can change them. Obviously changing them will piss off the person who is being kicked out, but sometimes you can get someone with better stats in who will do the job better. And next, laws. Here you can see your heir and pretenders. Pretenders are other people in the line of succession who are not in the direct, who are not the actual heir. So, for example, if I didn't have my son here, it would be my half-brother who would take the reins of the country. Well, not country, the dynasty. It's one thing, it's a very difficult concept to get your head around in Crusader Kings II, is the difference between managing a country and managing a dynasty. But it is an important one that influences how you play. This is your current succession law. So in this one, agnatic, cognatic, gravelkind. The titles of the ruler are divided amongst his children, with the oldest getting the primary title. If the ruler has no children who can inherit, the law defaults to primogeniture. You get no prestige penalty for having unlanded sons, and can have a 30% larger demesnes. Gravelkind is a very popular law with everyone except the oldest child. Women can inherit, but only if there are no eligible males. So that gives you an idea as to who can get what and how. If you want to know the different variations, you can simply hover over the title. So for example here, agnatic, only males can inherit. This essentially means that if you have female children, and only female children, you essentially will lose the game unless there's someone else in your dynasty who can take over the reins. Absolute cognatic, women inherit on the same grounds that men do. So in this case, if you have sons and daughters, and a daughter is the oldest, they will get the title. Whereas normally, if you have sons and daughters, the eldest son gets the title, even if there is a daughter who is older. It's complicated, but you'll get your head around it if you just have a quick read of them and when you start playing the game. And to be honest, these laws, you don't really do that much with them. So succession laws. We've got the idea of gender, next is succession. Seniority is the oldest member of the dynasty inherits all titles. Now that's the oldest member of the dynasty. It is not your oldest child. That is primogeniture. The oldest child inherits everything. You've got different effects from these. For example, primogeniture, the eldest child will have a much improved relationship with you. However, the children who are younger will have a damaged relationship because they're going to be pissed that they don't get anything. Elective monarchy is basically people vote. Tanistry is that there is a vote, but there are more people voting in that one. And ultimogeniture, the succession law, is the opposite for primogeniture. With ultimogeniture, the youngest child inherits. I have absolutely no idea why you'd want to do that. unless of course the eldest child was going to be damaging to your dynasty. Sometimes, because of the random nature of the game, you will get characters who get loads of crap stats and crap attributes, and this I think is probably one of the ways that you can avoid them ever actually being put in a position of power. That said, I've had really bad leaders pop up. They're hated by everyone. They're assassinated within a couple of months. The title passes on to one of their heirs, and that heir is much better liked and everything settles down again. It's like I was saying earlier, the game doesn't punish single bad decisions, it punishes bad directions. So sometimes, even though everything looks like it's gone down the shitter, you lose the ruler who was really bad, someone who's really liked takes power, and the game carries on, and you've just had a blip for a year. Next up, laws on taxation and levies. Setting the levy size up increases the amount of troops that you can get, but decreases the opinion of the rulers. So for example, church levies, you'll get more troops from your churches, but the church leaders will despise you more. Same with taxation, you'll get more money out of them, but you'll damage your relationship with them. So a lot of the time, this is quite useful if you have if the title of your dynasty is just passed on, you've got a new ruler. The rulers reigned for a short period of time, they've not yet built up the relationships with the vassals that your previous ruler had. Dropping your taxation or dropping your levies is a good way to improve your relations as a stopgap measure. Technology. I've never really paid much attention to this screen, to be completely honest with you, but you can choose to set focus here, which will increase the speed in that particular area. You can hover over them to see what the effects are. So for example, farming, each level of farming improves the taxes that you get from castle holdings. So as the only holding I currently own is a castle holding, it would be quite nice to leave the focus on farming, because that means that all of the money that's generated there I get, instead of just getting a portion of it, which is what I get from my vassals. Military advances. I've not really got anything here which is going to increase the size of specific parts of my levy. So for example, you can end up with small blowgas training, which gives you more heavy infantry. So if you've got territories in which you control a lot of heavy infantry, you might want to make sure that your heavy infantry, which is this one, heavy armour, has priority and focus, because that way you make sure that the most numerous troops are also your most advanced troops, so it compounds the advantage. Cultural advances typically deal with your relationships, economic advances deal with your money, military advances deal with your ability to wage war. So religious flexibility, not much use over here as everyone's Catholic, but again, over here on the Iberian Peninsula, far more useful. You can also switch between the average for your realm and the average and highest in your realm and immense. Again, just make sure you're set to something that's useful, read through them, and you can make an educated choice further down the line. We'll look into it in more detail, again, in the next videos. Military. Swords, maces, axe, knights, full plate, d20s. Okay, here you can raise your army levies. You can choose from domain and from vassals. From domain, this is your own personal levy. Vassals represent levies from basically your vassals. So depending on your laws and depending on a vassal's opinion of you, you can get larger and smaller troops raised. If I improve my relationship with Ragvold here, he will give me more troops. And that's basically that. You can raise... Oh, one important fact. When you raise levies from your vassals, the longer they're raised, the more the vassal will start to get pissed off with you. So wherever possible, if you want to wage war, try and do it with your own troops, i.e. only raising from your domain. Because that way, you're not pissing off your vassals and you're not risking rebellion. But of course, if you need the extra troops, make sure you call them in, because, well, it's good to be the king. Fleet levies, exactly the same thing, works in exactly the same way, the only difference is you're raising ships. Retinues, this is the closest thing you get to a standing army. Retinues can be around when you declare war. You cannot have your levies raised when war is declared. So this is a good way to get troops on the border immediately. So you can also set the reinforcement rate of your retinues, because if your retinues are reduced in size through battle damage, they will reinforce. However, reinforcement costs money and takes time. Levies, if they're damaged in battle, do not regenerate. They have to you have to just add more troops in, or better yet, disband them and then raise them again in a few months when they've had a chance to recover. Retinues are more useful further down later in the game as they're quite expensive, but they're the closest thing you have to a standing army, so make sure you use them when you get the chance. Mercenaries does exactly what it says on the tin. You pay a one-off cost, and then after that you pay a monthly cost, and for that you get a pretty sizable force. Even the smallest mercenary bands, such as this lot here, 1,500 troops. When you consider at the moment I can only raise 200, that's quite a bit. That costs 75 gold though, and then costs 6 gold a month. Make sure you've got that. If you don't, they decide to try and take the money that's owed to them. And they will do it by stomping all over your kingdom, pillaging your castles, and basically you then have to try and kill the mercenary band. And if you were in a position where you had to hire mercenaries to begin with, odds are you don't have the troops to do that. So always be careful if you're going to hire mercenaries. Intrigue. Okay, I'm going to slow down a bit here because intrigue is an extremely important part of the game. So if you're starting to feel a little bit overloaded or overwhelmed, pause the video, grab a drink, and then come back, because this is actually quite important. Okay? Ready? Okay. Right. First off, you can choose plots. Plots are a lot like ambitions. You can basically set a goal, and if you achieve it, you gain certain bonuses. So for example, here the plot is to revoke the county of Ormond. If I do so, I gain 1 intrigue. Just like the ambitions, I don't need to declare the plot to do this, but if I do declare the plot and do it, I get the bonus. But declaring the plot runs the risk of the plot being uncovered, and if it's uncovered, the subject of the plot is unlikely to be happy. So success conditions, I have to become the holder of the county of Ormond. That has to become a part of my domain, my personal domain. Let's select it. Plot power. Plot power is determined by the power of your spymaster, the power of your intrigue, and also people on board with the plot. So in this case, neither of these two people want to join. You can click the plus button here to select people who are in a position to aid with the plot. The percentage here shows the power that they can increase the plot to. So for example, if I got one of these, the plot would come up to 175. If I got both of them, the plot is at 200% power and rising. See if you can get it over 9,000. Neither of these are willing to join, both have the red thumbs down. Hover over and you can see why. So in this case, this nets out at 0. He doesn't really like the subject of our plot, Earl Ragnvald, but at the same time, his base reluctance nets it out at 0. So I could possibly get this guy on board with diplomacy. If I do something to improve my relationship with him, then I might get him to like me enough to get that second little green plus. This fellow, unlikely to get a result. This nets out at -2. He likes me, but he also quite likes the subject of the plot. Therefore, that's a negative, and the base reluctance is again -2. The higher the plot power is, the more frequently you will get events, or random events, related to the plot that will aid in its execution. So for example, at 150%, odds are that probably about every 6 months I'm going to get some sort of random event that will aid in me getting Ormond into my own domain. So always check the intrigue screen every so often and check what plots you have available to you, because sometimes you'd be surprised at the ones that pop up. Speaking of events, these decisions, beg your pardon, are in fact events that you can take. So you can see here, in order to get a result, this does actually need at least 1 backer. So again, when we get to politics, we'll get some backing for that plot. These events have costs associated with them. If you hover over the accept button there, you can see what they will cost you. if you hover over the question mark, you can see the conditions that you need to meet in order to be able to actually execute the plots. And if you hover over the plot name, it will tell you what the plot actually is. Sorry, not the plot, the decision, the event. I do beg your pardon, I've attempted to record this video once already and I realised that I spent 40 minutes with the audio input set to the wrong line. It was quite frustrating. Invite a holy man to court adds a religious themed character to your court, so some sort of priest. Noble is a political character. Debutante is a lady. Again, very useful for marrying off. Holding a feast. This is very difficult to do. It requires a lot of prestige. It's usually quite expensive, and you've got to do it at a specific time of the year, but it's a great way to improve relations with your vassals. Summer fair. Great way to improve relations with the vassals who are a bit lower down, so the ones who run the cities primarily. You also get certain random events in that one, as well as the one which is Hold a Feast, which may improve or change your stats. Grand Hunt, again, this is mainly a martial one. There's a good possibility that you'll get events that can improve your martial scores, and again also improve your standing with your vassals. Indulgence for your sins. It increases your piety but reduces your gold, so it's essentially swap gold for piety. So these are very, very useful as a means for actually furthering your cause and improving your relations. I spend a lot of time on these screens because if you improve your relations with your vassals, it makes the game much, much easier. And plots, outside of establishing titles and creating false claims, plots are one of the much better ways of expanding the size of your domain and expanding the size of your realm. Threats are basically people who are a threat to you. There is no one at the moment. Prisoners are people who you currently have imprisoned for whatever reason, and known plots are plots that your spy master has uncovered against you. Plots may range from people trying to usurp your titles to people actually trying to stick a knife through your ribs. So again, none of these are known at the moment. Factions. Factions are political groups within your realm who have a certain goal. Usually that goal is to your detriment. As at the moment I am the highest ranking person within this realm, any factions are going to be bad for me. So normally, let's say this fellow didn't have a very good relationship with me, it was in the negatives. He might think that he or somebody else would be much better suited to run the realm. To that end, he may found a faction, and that faction's goal would be to put him, or some other person who would be named in the faction name, in my stead. Factions will attract members. If the faction accumulates enough members and their military power is enough to rival yours, then there is a very, very good chance that they will actually attack you. So if you have factions, keep an eye on them. Sometimes you can appease the factions, sometimes, you've just got to shiv a bitch. But if you're playing under a liege, so for example if you're playing a rank down like an earl, or if you're playing as a duke who is part of the kingdom and swears fealty to a king, you can found factions and invite people to join the faction and achieve the same results. Religion. Religion is essentially your ability to monitor what's going on with the head of your religious order, in this case Catholicism and Das Pope. The Pope has moral authority. Moral authority affects what the Pope does, for example calling crusades and excommunication. If the Pope calls a crusade and you take part in the crusades, the Pope will like you, and the more the Pope likes you, the easier it is to get him to use his power to your ends, which we shall discuss in greater detail when we go on to politics. Finally, these vassal bishops are bishops who you actually have, who are part of your, well, basically who are vassals to you, as the name says. You can appoint successors to these bishops, or alternatively you can devolve or move that power to the Pope. The Pope will like it and it will improve relations with the Pope, but it does mean that you may end up with someone who doesn't like you in a position of power over one of your churches. So, swings and roundabouts, it's a decision you have to make in order to continue with the game. So that's what these are. That was quite a long one. I do apologise for that, but what we're now in a position to do is learn how to play the game, and we know roughly which screens we want to look at whenever we want to do something. So for example, if we're looking at waging war, we know we need to check the military screen, and from that military screen we can get ideas as to our relative military strengths. If we're looking at plots and trying to seize things through intrigue, we know we need to go to the intrigue screen, and we know roughly what things do here. The next stage of the tutorial will be to put each of these elements into its proper context, i.e. when you'd want to do it in certain situations in the gameplay, and in the next video we will actually start playing. So what I would suggest is go over this video again, then fire up your own version of the game, then play as Ireland, play as this character, Duke Murkad I of Munster, and have a good look at each of these screens until you're comfortable with what each of them is for and what it actually does. So until next time, I'm Evis T, signing off.